You ever feel like your whole world fits into a single moment? That's how it was when I held her hand that evening, planning our wedding, imagining the life we were about to build together. Everything around us blurred, the chatter of friends, the bright city lights. It all faded until there was only her, only us. I could feel it in my chest, this heavy, tender certainty that this was it, the beginning of forever. I remember the way she smiled when I suggested we pick out the flowers together. It wasn't just a smile, it was a promise, a quiet assurance that said, "We're in this together." I trusted her in a way I'd never trusted anyone. Not just with my heart, but with the little spaces inside me I had kept locked, the parts one thought no one could ever understand. And somehow she did. Or at least, I believe she did. We spent hours talking about our future. The house we'd live in, the mornings filled with coffee and sunlight, the trips we'd take to places neither of us had ever seen. I imagined our laughter filling every corner of our lives, imagined waking up next to her every day for decades, and I felt this surge of hope I thought I'd never feel again. Love, real love, feels like that, like the air is too small for what's inside you. It feels like flying, like the world finally aligns with your heartbeat. But even in that perfect glow, I noticed the little things. A pause too long when I mentioned my parents, a fleeting shadow over her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. I pushed it away, told myself it was nothing. Love makes you blind sometimes. It convinces you that discomfort is just a shadow of nerves, that small cracks are just the way light bends through trust. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. I told her everything. The dreams I carried, the fears I didn't dare voice to anyone else. I painted pictures of a life where nothing could hurt us, where nothing could shake what we had. I thought love meant sharing everything, giving everything, trusting with a kind of reckless abandon. And she received it all, or at least she acted like she did. There were moments of quiet intimacy that felt like the universe itself had conspired for us. Sitting together, planning the seating chart for our families, laughing over the tastings at the restaurant, brushing our fingers over wedding rings that were still months away from being ours. I felt alive in a way I hadn't before. Every small touch, every glance, every word was a promise. A heartbeat synced with mine. And yet, beneath it all, there was a subtle tension I couldn't name. A tiny unease that whispered when we were alone. It didn't matter, I told myself. Love, I thought, is not about ignoring shadows. It's about choosing the light anyway. So I chose her every single time. I smiled when she smiled. I made plans as if our forever was written in stone. I held her hand as if the world could never take her from me. Because that's what love feels like before the storm. Perfect, fragile, terrifyingly beautiful. You trust someone so completely that you forget the world exists outside the two of you. You build a life in your mind, brick by brick, believing it's unshakable. You give everything, and sometimes, without realizing it, you leave yourself open to more than just love. And in that open space, hope lives. And in that hope, you believe that forever is not just a dream. It's a promise you can reach for. A week before the wedding, the world I thought was unshakable began to feel thin, like a fragile glass, trembling under the slightest pressure. Sanaa started acting differently, small things at first. A pause before she answered my texts, a nervous glance at her phone when I walked into the room, laughter that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed, of course I noticed. How could I not? When you love someone the way I loved her, every subtle change becomes a warning light flashing in your chest. At first, I told myself it was stress. Wedding planning is exhausting. Everyone gets nervous. Maybe she just needed space. But the unease in her voice, the hesitation in her touch, it settled over me like a weight I couldn't shake. And the texts, oh, the texts. She would step away to answer them, shield her phone like it carried secrets too heavy for me to bear. Each buzz of her screen became a jolt to my stomach, a small spark of fear I couldn't dismiss. I tried to ignore it, try to convince myself that love is supposed to be trust, that suspicion poisons everything. But every instinct screamed otherwise. There's a part of you, deep, raw, unspoken, that senses when something is off. And I could feel it creeping like a shadow in the corners of my heart. Friends began to notice too. They'd look at me across the table and see the tension in my hands, the hollowed eyes I tried to hide behind forced smiles. "Are you okay?" they'd ask. And I'd nod, lie, tell them it's just stress. But inside, the questions burned. Why is she distant? Who is she texting? Am I imagining this? Am I losing her already? I wrestled with it constantly. Love versus suspicion. Faith versus fear. Every time I tried to push the doubts aside, they surged back, sharper, louder. I replayed every interaction in my mind, every glance and word. Did I miss something? Was there a moment she wanted me to see, but I didn't? I wanted to trust her desperately, but trust felt fragile now, slipping through my fingers like smoke. And then there were the hints, the little things that shouldn't have meant anything, but meant everything. A name mentioned in passing, a laugh that didn't include me, a sudden defensiveness when I asked a question. My mind, my heart, both screamed warnings, but my love wanted to believe, wanted to cling to the idea that everything was fine, that she was just nervous, that I was overthinking it. The nights were the worst. Alone in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling, imagining scenarios that I hated to imagine. Every possibility I feared came alive in the darkness, twisted into shapes I couldn't escape. Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but another part, the part that loved her more than it feared pain, whispered, "Not yet. Wait. Give her the benefit of the doubt." Even among friends, advice came in waves I wasn't ready for. "Trust her," some said. "You deserve honesty," others said. Every word was like a mirror held up to my insecurity. I didn't know who to believe anymore. Could love survive the whisper of doubt? Could it endure when suspicion starts to creep in? When every gesture and every word is filtered through the lens of fear? And yet, despite everything, I couldn't let go. I wanted to believe in the us I had imagined, the future I had already built in my mind. I wanted to believe that this fleeting unease was just a storm passing through, not the first crack in the foundation. But love is cruel in its demands. It asks you to give everything, even when your gut tells you to protect yourself. And I was giving everything. Even the parts of me that screamed, "Look closer, something's wrong." I saw her smile, and it nearly fooled me again. I touched her hand, and for a fleeting moment, the fear dissolved. I wanted to drown in that moment and forget the rest. I wanted to pretend nothing had shifted. But deep down, I knew the truth I didn't want to face. Love doesn't erase doubt. It doesn't silence fear. And sometimes, even the most perfect moments carry shadows. By the end of the week, the unease had grown into a quiet storm in my chest. Every laugh, every text, every glance was layered with tension. I didn't know what was coming, and I couldn't stop the questions from consuming me. But I also couldn't stop loving her. That was the cruelest part. The part that made my nights longer, my thoughts heavier, and my heart more fragile than I ever imagined. Because love, real love, isn't just joy. It's this balancing act between faith and fear, between hope and dread. And as I looked at her, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me, I realized that the moment before everything changes is the most dangerous, the most tender, the most unbearable feeling of all. I never imagined that a single moment could unravel everything you've ever believed in. 1 week before the wedding, 1 week before forever, I found out. Sanaa, my Sanaa, had been with him. Armin, her ex. And just like that, the world I had built, every dream I'd stitched together with hope, came crashing down around me. I remember the moment I knew. The words weren't whispered. They weren't even spoken. I saw it. The messages, the evidence, the undeniable proof of what had happened. It wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. And the shock didn't hit me all at once. First came disbelief. I stared at the screen as if it were a lie, as if the universe had played some cruel trick. My heart beat too fast. My lungs refused to fill with air. It was like watching your own life fracture in slow motion, like every second stretched into an eternity of pain. Then came the betrayal. It wasn't just the act itself. It was the timing, the audacity, the way she had smiled at me all week, as if everything were perfect. All the love I had given, all the trust one had invested, it meant nothing to her. I could feel it tearing through me, a raw, jagged ache that refused to be soothed. My stomach churned, my hands shook, and my mind refused to stop replaying every moment, every smile, every word she had said. Was it all a lie? Did she ever love me? Or was I just a convenient story she told herself until he came back in her life? Anger followed closely behind. Not the quiet, manageable kind, but the kind that roars, that sets your teeth on edge, that makes your hands clench and your jaw ache. Anger at him. Armin, who I had never met as more than a shadow in her past, but mostly at her. How could she do this? How could she betray me in the week when we were supposed to be building a future? Did she not see the life we had imagined? Did she not care that I had trusted her with every vulnerable part of myself? Confusion drowned me next. My thoughts spiraled like a storm with no end. How long had this been happening? Was it just a one-time lapse, or had it been going on secretly for weeks, maybe months? Did everyone around me know? Did she lie about everything? And in the quietest, cruelest moments, I even questioned myself. Had I missed the signs? Had my love blinded me so completely that I walked right past the truth, oblivious to the cracks spreading beneath our feet? I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to collapse and never rise again. But instead, I felt hollow. Every emotion, every reaction seemed muted, like I was trapped behind a glass wall, watching my life fall apart from the other side. The trust, the hope, the dreams, they were gone, and all that remained was this raw, searing pain that refused to be ignored. She walked in later that evening, unaware that I knew. She smiled at me, leaning into my arms, her voice soft and tender. And I wanted to reach out, to hold her close, to pretend nothing had happened. But I couldn't. My arms felt heavy with betrayal. My heart refused to recognize her warmth as love. Every touch, every word, every glance was now tainted by what I had seen. It wasn't her smile I felt. It was the ghost of her deceit. I confronted her, not calmly, not with measured words, but with the full weight of my hurt, my disbelief, my anger. She denied it at first. Then she faltered. Then she blamed me, for not trusting her enough, for doubting her, for even noticing the distance, the text, the unease. And in that moment, the depth of my heartbreak became clear. Love, I had thought, was about faith, about giving everything. But she had weaponized my trust, turned it into a mirror reflecting only my failures. Armin loomed in my mind, not as a person, but as a symbol of everything that had been stolen. Everything we had planned, every moment we had imagined together, felt invaded by him. And I hated him. I hated him for being the catalyst, for reminding her of something she wanted more than me. I hated him for being the ghost that made me question everything I thought I knew about love, about loyalty, about myself. I don't know how long I sat there afterward, numb and trembling, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat in the silence of what used to be my home. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Every part of me felt raw and exposed, like someone had taken all the air out of the room and left me to choke on the remains. And the most painful truth of all, I still loved her. I still loved her in spite of it all. And that realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because love doesn't prepare you for this. Love doesn't prepare you for the day your world is torn from under your feet by the one person you trusted most. And in that heartbreak, in that absolute, unrelenting agony, I realized something I hadn't before. Love can be cruel, but also reveals the deepest parts of who you are. And if you survive it, if you rise from it, you emerge knowing that trust and hope are precious and fragile, and that no one has the right to take them from you without consequence. I thought confronting her would bring clarity, a chance for honesty, maybe even the closure I desperately needed. I thought the truth would sting, but at least it would be real. But when I faced Sanaa, the world tilted in a way I couldn't have imagined. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't even pause long enough to let the weight of what she'd done settle between us. Instead, she looked at me as if I were the one at fault. Me, for doubting her, for noticing the signs, for letting suspicion creep into my heart. Rage erupted first, pure, white-hot fury that burned through every part of me. How could she, after everything, turn on me? How could she make me feel small, ridiculous, like my instincts, my intuition, my love were the problem? The room felt smaller, the air heavier, and my chest tight, as if the world itself had conspired to punish me for loving too much. Every word she spat, every blame she threw, was like a punch to the gut. And yet, beneath the rage, a quiet, deeper ache began to spread. Humiliation, the kind that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. I replayed the confrontation in my mind endlessly. The way she leaned back, arms crossed, eyes cold, speaking with this practiced calm that made me question reality. You're overreacting. You don't trust me. You're imagining things. The words didn't just sting. They rewrote the narrative in my head. Was I imagining it? Was it really my fault for questioning her? The sheer audacity of her manipulation twisted the knife further. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to shout that I had seen, I had felt, I had known, but the voice that demanded truth inside me was drowned out by the subtle suggestion. Maybe I was the problem. And despair followed. Not the sharp, sudden kind, but the slow, suffocating kind that creeps in when the ground beneath you has crumbled. I felt the weight of betrayal compound with shame. The shame of being blind, of being naive, of having trusted someone so completely that they could dismantle your world and still make you feel guilty for noticing. I wanted to leave, to escape, to slam the door on her and never look back, but the emotional chain she had wrapped around me held me in place. Every glance, every word, every false indignation kept me trapped in a storm I couldn't calm. I thought about everything I'd shared with her, the dreams, the fears, the promises, and realized how they had been used against me. My love had become ammunition. My trust had been turned into a weapon. And the cruelest part? She had the power to make me question myself, to make me doubt my own perception, to make me feel small in the face of my heartbreak. Gaslighting is subtle, insidious. It doesn't just hurt you. It makes you believe you deserve the hurt, that somehow you caused it. And I was drowning in it. The friends who had noticed my anxiety earlier, they couldn't reach me now. Their words of caution, of support, felt distant and faint, like echoes in a cavern I had been trapped inside. I wanted to tell them, to reach out, but every time I tried, a whisper of doubt lingered. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm overreacting. The mind is a treacherous place when someone you love convinces you that reality itself is flawed. And yet, beneath the layers of rage, humiliation, and despair, a quiet, flickering fire remained. It was faint at first, easily extinguished by her words and the suffocating weight of her lies. But it was there, in the recesses of my heart, that refused to be fully claimed by guilt. This fire reminded me that I was still me, that I could still see, still feel, still recognize the truth, even when she tried to rewrite it. That quiet defiance, almost imperceptible, was the seed of what I would become. I don't think anyone understands how devastating it is to be gaslit by someone you trusted with everything. To have the person you loved turn your own intuition against you, to make you feel like a villain in your own story. But in that suffocating space, I realized something crucial. No one has the power to define your truth unless you allow it. And while she tried to break me, to make me bend and bow under the weight of her deception, she didn't yet know that the fight was only beginning. Because rage fades, humiliation eventually dulls, despair may linger, but it also reveals the parts of yourself that refuse to surrender. And in that revelation, I found the faintest glimmer of strength, a reminder that truth is not dependent on her approval, that trust misplaced does not erase your ability to see clearly, and that even in the most calculated cruelty, you can reclaim yourself. I never thought it would come to this. Ending an engagement wasn't supposed to be part of our story. But the moment I realized the depth of her betrayal, the gaslighting, the lies, I knew I had a choice. I could stay pretending that love could survive this, or I could walk away before I lost the last pieces of myself. And for the first time in weeks, clarity replaced the storm inside me. I made my decision. I would break the engagement. The conversation wasn't easy. I said the words slowly, deliberately, feeling their weight with every syllable. "It's over," I told her. She froze. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled, but she didn't look ashamed, only indignant, as if I had committed some unforgivable crime. And then came the attempts to twist reality into guilt. "How could you do this to me? After everything? How can you just throw us away?" But I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I had finally realized that her version of love had never included me. It had only included control. Walking away was both terrifying and liberating. I felt the sting of judgment already. What would family think? Friends? Society itself, with its relentless expectations about loyalty, love, and commitment? But as the shock spread across the faces of those closest to me, I also felt something I hadn't in weeks: support. Genuine support. My parents didn't scold me. They didn't demand I endure humiliation for the sake of appearances. They reminded me gently, painfully, that love doesn't require surrendering your dignity, that trust cannot be negotiated or faked. My friends, who had watched me wrestle with doubt and despair, hugged me, held me, told me I was brave for refusing to let betrayal define me. Their words felt like armor. Sana, of course, tried. The guilt tripping, the pleas, the subtle threats that I was making a mistake I'd regret. But I had learned the difference between fear and conviction. The regret I felt wasn't for leaving her. It was for all the red flags I had ignored, for every quiet suspicion I had pushed aside in the name of love, for every moment I had allowed my trust to be weaponized. And acknowledging those regrets didn't weaken me. It sharpened me. It reminded me that self-awareness is as much a part of love as trust is, and that ignoring your own instincts is the quickest path to ruin. As I reflected, I realized how often we convince ourselves that love should hurt less than this. We tell ourselves that compromises, discomfort, and even humiliation are part of the price of loyalty. But that is a lie. True love doesn't demand that you shrink, silence yourself, or tolerate betrayal. Walking away wasn't just an act of ending the engagement. It was an act of reclaiming my boundaries, my self-respect, my ability to trust again. The emotional weight of the decision lingered, but it was different now. It wasn't the crushing weight of doubt or fear. It was the steady, grounding weight of knowing I had acted for myself. I wasn't running from pain. I was stepping into clarity. Every step away from her, every decision to assert my boundaries, was a statement. My life, my heart, and my trust are not negotiable. Even in the quiet aftermath, when the house was empty and the echoes of what could have been hung in the air, I felt a strange kind of peace. I wasn't celebrating betrayal, and I wasn't naive enough to think the scars would fade overnight. But I was free. Free from the manipulation. Free from the constant questioning of my worth. Free from the suffocating illusion that love requires surrendering yourself entirely. I looked back once, not at her, but at the person I'd been before all of this. The trusting, hopeful, unguarded me. And I realized that leaving wasn't abandoning that person. It was protecting him. It was teaching him, and myself, that love and respect cannot exist without boundaries. That betrayal, no matter how close it comes to the people you trust most, does not have the power to define your value. Breaking the engagement was not the end of my story. It was the first real step toward reclaiming it. And though the pain of what I had lost would linger, it was now tempered with clarity, with the knowledge that I had chosen myself over lies, manipulation, and fear. I had chosen truth, and in that choice, I had begun to find the strength to rebuild, to trust again someday, and to love properly, fully, and without surrendering my own worth. The days after the engagement ended felt like walking through a fog that never lifted. Every room, every street, every familiar sound carried echoes of her, Sana, and the life I had imagined with her. I felt hollow, unmoored, like a part of me had been ripped out and left behind somewhere in the ruins of what I thought love should be. And yet, in that emptiness, there was a flicker, faint but persistent, a voice telling me that I could survive this, that I could find myself again. I didn't know how at first. The nights were long, filled with the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your own thoughts unbearable. I would stare at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every betrayal, wondering if I had missed something, wondering if I was too trusting, too naive. Self-doubt became a constant companion. I questioned everything, my judgment, my capacity to love, even my worth. And for a while, I believed that maybe she had been right, that I had overreacted, that maybe I'd failed to love her properly. But then I realized that survival meant action. I couldn't just sit in the wreckage and wait for clarity to arrive. I needed to rebuild piece by piece. That's when I turned to therapy, not because I felt broken beyond repair, but because I needed guidance to navigate the labyrinth of my own mind. Speaking aloud the pain I had carried in silence for so long was terrifying. It forced me to confront the depths of my grief, my anger, and my shame. But with every session, the fog lifted a little. I began to see the betrayal not as a reflection of my worth, but as a reflection of someone else's choices, someone else's inability to honor trust and love. Journaling became another lifeline. At first, it was just a way to empty my head, to get the thoughts swirling endlessly on the page. But soon, it became a mirror, reflecting not just the pain, but the resilience hiding beneath it. I wrote about the moments when I felt anger and humiliation, but I also wrote about the small victories, the mornings when I woke up without feeling crushed, the evenings when I could smile at something ordinary without guilt. Writing reminded me that healing isn't linear, that pain and strength can coexist, and that every small step forward is meaningful. Friends became my anchors. My best friend, my confidant through every late-night conversation, every tearful confession, was my most important lifeline. He didn't offer cliches or platitudes. He didn't try to rush my grief or tell me to move on. He just listened. He reminded me that the storm I had endured was not a mark of weakness, but a crucible that would forge me stronger. We would sit for hours, talking about everything and nothing, laughing through the remnants of heartbreak. And somehow, those moments of connection reminded me that I was not alone, that I didn't have to carry this weight by myself. Slowly, the isolation that had once felt suffocating began to transform. I started to reclaim pieces of my life that had been overshadowed by love and betrayal. I re-engaged with hobbies I had abandoned, spent time in places that reminded me of who I was before she entered my life, and allowed myself to feel joy again, even if it was fragile at first. Each experience became a proof point. I was capable of happiness on my own. I was capable of being whole without her. And as the weeks turned into months, I began to recognize a shift within myself. Pain, once all-consuming, became a teacher. I learned patience with my own heart, compassion for my own mistakes, and the power of boundaries. I realized that emotional resilience isn't about forgetting the hurt. It's about acknowledging it, confronting it, and choosing to move forward anyway. Every tear I shed, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt contributed to a deeper understanding of who I was and who I wanted to become. I also began to see love differently. Not as blind trust, not as surrender, not as the giving of everything at the expense of yourself, but as a partnership that requires respect, honesty, and reciprocity. The lessons learned from betrayal were painful, but they were real. And for the first time, I felt that I could enter future relationships with eyes wide open, heart intact, and boundaries firmly in place. By the time the fog fully lifted, I felt a quiet, steady strength coursing through me. I was no longer defined by the betrayal or the heartbreak, but by how I had faced it, how I had allowed myself to feel it, and how I had rebuilt from it. I wasn't the same person who had dreamed of forever with her. I was stronger, wiser, and more certain of my worth. I had survived the storm, and in surviving, I had discovered something remarkable, the capacity to love myself fully and unconditionally without apology or compromise. Picking up the pieces wasn't easy. It was slow, deliberate, and sometimes painful. But with every piece reclaimed, every boundary respected, every moment of self-compassion, I realized that I could live fully, honestly, and freely again. And in that realization, I found not just healing, but a sense of liberation that no betrayal could ever take from me. Pain leaves a mark. That's undeniable. But over time, it also teaches you truths you might never learn otherwise. Sitting alone in the quiet of my apartment, long after the storm of betrayal and heartbreak has passed, I realized that I had been changed, not broken, but refined. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had been a lesson in disguise. I had learned, finally, how to recognize my worth, how to protect it, and how to hold myself with the respect I had once given so freely to someone undeserving. I think about trust now, and it feels different. Not fragile or naive, but deliberate. Trust is no longer something I hand over blindly. It is a gift I choose carefully. It is not given to fill the silence, or to avoid discomfort, or to chase the illusion of perfection. Trust is earned, nurtured, and mutual. I see now how easily I had allowed it to be taken for granted before, how my hope and love had been weaponized against me. And in recognizing that, I understand that trust is also a measure of self-respect. If someone cannot honor it, then holding on to them only diminishes your own value. Self-worth, too, has become clearer. Before, I equated love with sacrifice, giving everything, tolerating betrayal, excusing lies, convincing myself that pain was acceptable if it came with affection. Now I see that my value is not dependent on someone else's actions. It is not negotiable, nor is it something to be validated by another person's approval. I have learned that the most profound love begins within yourself, and without it, no relationship, no matter how intoxicating, can sustain you. I am worth honesty, loyalty, and care, not as a favor, but because it is who I am, because it is what I deserve. Boundaries have become my armor. Before, I blurred them in the name of love, bending to comfort others or to maintain illusions of harmony. I now understand that boundaries are not barriers. They're the framework that keeps your heart safe. They allow you to love fully without being consumed. They allow you to recognize when someone's presence is toxic, when manipulation is at play, when giving too much is simply giving away yourself. Boundaries are not selfish, they are survival. And learning to assert them has given me a freedom I never knew I could have. I reflect on how much I carried silently, the doubts I ignored, the signs I overlooked, the instincts I dismissed. Each of these moments, in hindsight, was an opportunity to listen to myself, to honor my intuition, to act with courage. Pain forced me to confront the reality that love is not always enough. That hope cannot replace truth. That forgiveness does not require self-erasure. And in facing these truths, I began to build a stronger, more resilient version of myself. I also see now the difference between love and need. Before, I conflated the two, mistaking dependency for devotion, tolerating betrayal for the sake of companionship. But strength, I have learned, is not found in clinging. It is found in standing alone, in facing the emptiness, in being willing to let go rather than lose yourself. It is in choosing clarity over illusion, integrity over comfort, and truth over pretense. Looking back, I realized that every heartbreak, every betrayal, every moment of doubt was a mirror, reflecting the parts of myself I needed to understand. Pain exposed my vulnerabilities, yes, but it also revealed my resilience, my capacity to feel deeply, and my ability to rise again. And rising is not a one-time act. It is continuous. Every decision, every boundary, every assertion of self-worth is a small triumph, a declaration that the past does not dictate the future. Now, I carry my lessons like armor, but not like a shield that isolates me from the world. Instead, It is a framework of awareness, a guide that ensures I never surrender myself to manipulation, deceit, or disregard again. I am more discerning, more cautious, yes, but also more compassionate, more empathetic, more fully present. I have learned to value not just the love I give, but the integrity with which I give it. Pain taught me that survival is not enough. Growth is not optional, and freedom is not a destination. It is a practice, a choice, and a state of mind. I have learned that I am stronger than I believed, more aware than I allowed myself to be, and capable of loving both myself and others without losing the essence of who I am. And so I move forward, not as the person who dreamed blindly, not as the person who surrendered without question, but as someone who has faced the darkness, felt the sting of betrayal, and emerged with clarity. The scars remain, yes, but they are not chains. They are proof. Proof that I endured, that I learned, and that I can navigate love, loss, and life with eyes wide open, heart intact, and spirit unbroken. Time has a way of balancing itself, even when we can't see it happening. Weeks after the engagement ended, the ripples of her choices began to settle. Not for me, not because I had orchestrated anything, but because truth has a way of demanding recognition. Sanaa's world, the one built on deception and manipulation, started to crumble. Her relationship with Armin, the very person who had catalyzed the betrayal, fell apart as quickly and brutally as it had begun. I didn't need to intervene. I didn't need to take revenge. Life simply unfolded, exposing the consequences of her actions in ways she hadn't anticipated. It's strange, the mix of emotions that came with witnessing it. There was no triumph in my heart, no sense of satisfaction. That wasn't closure. Closure isn't about seeing someone else punished. It's about reclaiming your own peace, your own understanding, your own place in the world. And slowly, as I observed the fallout, I realized that the real closure was not in her suffering, but in the quiet realization that I could move forward unburdened by anger or the need for retribution. I reflected on the months that had passed, the heartbreak, the gaslighting, the betrayal. Each moment had been excruciating, but each had also been instructive. I saw, with clarity now, the red flags I had ignored, the warnings my instincts had whispered but I had silenced. And I understood something vital. Closure does not come from the other person admitting their faults or paying a price. It comes from accepting what happened, integrating the lessons, and reclaiming your own life. I didn't feel gloating or vindication or any desire to rub her misfortune in her face. The world has a way of delivering its own justice, often more elegantly and efficiently than we could manage. Watching her face the consequences of her choices was almost irrelevant. What mattered was the freedom I felt, the lightness that returned to my chest, the absence of obsession or unresolved anger. I could finally breathe again. I could finally let go. Friends and family noticed the change in me. The tension that had gripped my shoulders, the storm that had lurked in my eyes, softened. They saw a person who had endured betrayal, yet emerged whole, stronger, and more aware. And that, I realized, was a kind of karma in itself. Not theirs, not hers, but mine. The universe had a strange way of rewarding those who survived, who learned, who grew, who chose integrity over vengeance. Closure also meant forgiveness, but not for her. I didn't forgive her because she deserved it, or because she asked for it. I forgave the situation, the past, the way my heart had been misled. I forgave myself for the moments I had doubted, for the times I had ignored my instincts, for the vulnerability I had shown. Forgiveness, I realized, was an act of liberation, not reconciliation. It was the final key to reclaiming my emotional sovereignty. I began to see the trajectory of my own life clearly again. I could make plans, dream big, and invest my trust in the people who had proven they were worthy, not blindly, but consciously, deliberately. I understood that every heartbreak, every mistake, every lesson was a building block for a future I could craft without fear. And that realization brought peace in a way that revenge never could. Even when I thought about her, Sanaa, I felt only neutrality, a kind of gentle distance. I wasn't angry. I wasn't longing. I wasn't caught in the snare of what could have been. I simply acknowledged what had happened, accepted it fully, and moved on. The weight of resentment and despair had been lifted. I had allowed myself to close the chapter properly, not by controlling her fate, but by taking control of my own. Karma isn't about punishment. It's about natural consequences, the way life unfolds when actions align with character. And closure isn't about seeing someone else fail. It's about claiming your own life back, intact, whole, and stronger for having endured the storm. I had learned that the best revenge is not revenge at all, but growth, resilience, and the unwavering decision to live fully despite what happened. And as I looked ahead, I realized something profound. Life moves forward with or without closure from others. But when you take responsibility for your own peace, for your own healing, for your own growth, you achieve something far more powerful than retribution. You achieve freedom. And in that freedom, I finally understood the depth of what I had gained. Not through anger, not through bitterness, but through surviving, learning, and choosing to rise above it all. Life doesn't wait for permission. It keeps moving whether you're ready or not, whether you're broken or whole. And I realized that if I wanted happiness, if I wanted to reclaim the joy that had been stolen, I had to build it myself. Not for anyone else, not for validation, but for me. I threw myself into my work, into projects that challenged me, that demanded focus and creativity. I discovered that dedication to something meaningful is a kind of therapy, a way to rebuild confidence brick by brick. Every task completed, every goal reached, reminded me that I am capable, that I am resilient, that I am more than the heartbreak I endured. Passions I had neglected for the sake of love, writing, music, travel, became my refuge. I explored them with a new intensity, not to escape, but to rediscover who I was before betrayal entered my life. I remembered the person I had been, the dreams I had once nurtured, and I began to merge them with the wisdom gained from the storm. This wasn't just distraction, it was reclamation. It was proof that life continues, and that it can be beautiful again. I also nurtured relationships that mattered, those rooted in honesty, respect, and support. Friends who had stayed by my side, family who had reminded me of my worth. They became the foundation of a life rebuilt with care. I learned to invest in people who lifted me, who celebrated my growth, and who didn't demand the surrender of my boundaries or dignity. Optimism slowly replaced the heaviness I had carried. Not blind optimism, but the kind that is born from experience, the understanding that life is unpredictable, that pain is inevitable, but that so is recovery. Every morning, I wake up feeling lighter, more focused, more in control of the trajectory of my life. I have learned to trust myself again, not in love alone, but in the choices I make, the actions I take, and the way I navigate my own journey. Moving on is not forgetting. It is not pretending nothing happened. It is embracing what is possible now, without the shadows of the past dictating your happiness. I have discovered that freedom is built in small steps. Choosing yourself daily, prioritizing growth, protecting your peace, and allowing hope to flourish even after devastation. I am building a life I am proud of. A life guided not by fear, not by betrayal, but by self-respect, ambition, and the knowledge that I am whole on my own. And in that truth, I finally understand that happiness is not granted. It is created fiercely, deliberately, and unapologetically. And I'm doing exactly that.